Gabriel Reyes didn't expect a war to start in his own driveway. The envelope was plain, no return address, just a cold, lifeless stamp from the Fox Hollow Homeowners Association. He found it wedged in his mailbox one humid Thursday morning, right beside a coupon for gutter cleaning and a realtor's postcard offering to upgrade your lifestyle. But the moment he unfolded the letter, something clenched deep in his gut. Mr. Reyes? It has come to the attention of the Fox Hollow HOA board that a motorcycle, currently parked in your driveway, is not in alignment with the aesthetic standards outlined in Section 11C of the Community Charter. We respectfully request that the vehicle be removed from public view within 72 hours. Failure to comply may result in further action. That was it. No signature. No phone number. Just a faceless warning, cold, entitled, and vaguely threatening. Gabriel stared at it, unblinking, for a long moment. Then he looked up at the subject of the attack. There, resting in the early morning sun like a sleeping monument, was his 1968 Indian Scout. Golden steel, hand-polished chrome, leather seat darkened by time and memory. It wasn't just a motorcycle, it was a relic, a rebuilt warhorse salvaged from a rusted-out wreck he'd found in a scrapyard 20 years ago. Piece by piece, bolt by bolt, he'd restored it with his own hands. Not for show. Not for speed. But for a man named Julian. Julian Cortez had served with him in the jungles of Vietnam, tight brothers in a world gone sideways. Julian never made it home. But the Scout did. And when Gabriel rebuilt it, it was like bringing a part of Julian back with him. He never rode that bike without thinking of the friend who didn't get a second chance. And now some paper-pushing HOA clown had decided it was an aesthetic violation? Gabriel didn't scream. He didn't even curse. He folded the letter neatly, tucked it back into its envelope, and set it on the kitchen table like it was a landmine he'd be defusing later. Then he put on his boots. At the Fox Hollow Community Center, the Thursday HOA meeting was already underway, half a dozen board members sipping iced coffees, murmuring about lawn heights and holiday decorations. At the center of it all, perched like a smug vulture in a pastel blue golf shirt, sat Darren Wells, president of the HOA, retired real estate agent, full-time tyrant. Gabriel didn't wait his turn. He stepped into the room, the letter in his fist. Who decided my motorcycle was a problem? Darren didn't flinch. He didn't even look surprised. Mr. Reyes, he said with a placid smile, we're simply enforcing community standards. Vehicles like that tend to diminish the property value image we're cultivating here. Gabriel's voice was low and steady. That vehicle is older than your entire HOA charter. And it means a hell of a lot more. Darren gave a half shrug, that infuriating real estate agent smirk glued to his face. I'm sure it does, to you. But Fox Hollow has expectations. We pride ourselves on maintaining a certain caliber. Gabriel leaned forward, eyes locked. Then I suggest you recalibrate. The room fell quiet. Someone coughed. Darren straightened a stack of meaningless papers and gave a final nod. You have 72 hours, Mr. Reyes. Gabriel turned and walked out, the letter still clenched in his hand, but now it felt different, not like a warning, but a declaration of war. And Darren Wells? He had just picked a fight with the wrong man. Gabriel didn't move the bike. Not out of defiance for its own sake, but out of something deeper, a refusal to let petty men erase a piece of history. For 3 days he went about his routine like nothing had happened. He brewed his coffee. He fed the mourning doves that perched on the fence. And every morning, before the sun crested over the rooftops of Fox Hollow, he polished the Scout's gas tank until it shimmered gold. On the 4th night, just past 2 a.m., he heard it. A low metallic clank, followed by a grinding sound like teeth gnashing over gravel. Gabriel's instincts kicked in before his brain had time to name them. Combat reflexes never really left a man. He sprang from bed, threw on his jeans and boots without thinking, and bolted out the front door. What greeted him in the driveway was nothing. Nothing but an empty patch of concrete, glistening under the street lamp where the Scout had been. For a full 5 seconds, his body refused to register it. The space looked wrong, like a missing tooth in a smile. He stepped forward, still barefoot on the warm concrete, hoping, absurdly, that the bike had rolled down the drive somehow, or that he'd parked it elsewhere. But the oil stain was still there. The Scout was gone. His breath turned shallow. Then tight. Then hard and sharp like cold steel. There were no tire marks. No broken chain. No smashed lock. Which meant only one thing: it wasn't stolen. It was towed. And there was only one entity in Fox Hollow who had the gall and the authority to do that. The HOA. He didn't call the police. He didn't scream into the empty night. He simply turned, walked calmly back inside, grabbed his truck keys and his wallet, and drove toward the only impound lot that would have been open and willing to take a classic motorcycle without a shred of legal process. Maplewood Municipal Towing was a stain on the county's underbelly. The place looked like it had been held together with rust and bad decisions. A sagging chain-link fence surrounded rows of dented cars, flat tires, and oil puddles that shimmered under floodlights. There was a single-window office trailer sitting crooked on cinder blocks, a red open sign flickering like it was on life support. Gabriel killed the engine and stepped out, his boots crunching gravel. Inside, a man who looked like he hadn't blinked since the Clinton administration leaned on the counter. Mismatched flannel shirt, half-smoked cigarette hanging off his lip. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice scratchy and bored. "I'm looking for a 1968 Indian Scout. Gold tank. Brown leather seat. Should have come in tonight." The man squinted at a clipboard. Flipped a page. Then another. "Yeah, came in around midnight. HOA call. Said it was abandoned." Gabriel's eyes narrowed. "Abandoned? On private property?" The man shrugged. "They had the tow authorization. That's all we need." "Where is it?" The guy jerked his thumb toward the yard. "Back corner. Behind the boat trailer." Gabriel walked fast. He found it in 30 seconds, and wished he hadn't. The Scout was lying on its side, half buried in gravel like a corpse. The once pristine tank was caved in, a jagged dent spidering across the gold like a shotgun blast. The leather seat was ripped straight through. The front fork had bent so far inward the front tire barely touched the ground. The mirror dangled by a single twisted wire. He dropped to one knee. Ran a trembling hand across the mangled chrome. It came away streaked with oil and dust. He didn't say a word. Didn't shout. Didn't cry. But deep inside him, something cracked, the same way a steel blade does when it's pushed beyond its limit. He stood up slowly, turned back toward the trailer. "You towed it like that?" he asked. The man leaned in the doorway, unmoved. "I don't inspect 'em. We just pick up what they tell us." Gabriel nodded once. No anger. Just that steady calm that always came before a storm. "Keep it parked," he said. "But don't touch another damn bolt on it. Not unless you want to deal with a legal team that eats paperwork for breakfast." The man blinked, uncertain. "You a lawyer?" "No," Gabriel said. "But I've got more reach than you think. And that bike." He looked back at the broken Scout, broken but still his. "That bike's gonna be your biggest mistake." He walked back to the truck, slow and deliberate. He didn't burn rubber. He didn't peel out. He just drove off into the night, a silence settling around him like armor. Because this wasn't about a motorcycle anymore. This was about honor. Memory. Respect. And Darren Wells had just declared war on all three. Gabriel didn't sleep that night. He didn't even sit down. He walked into his garage, now just a hollow box of concrete and dust, where the Scout had always stood like a sentinel of memory. Without it, the space felt sterile. Lifeless. Like someone had ripped out a piece of his soul and left a footprint where it used to be. He stared at the empty spot for a long time. Then he pulled the tarp off the workbench, uncovered the small black DSLR camera he hadn't used in months, and set it on the tripod. He flipped the switch. Sat down in the stool. Looked straight into the lens. No script. No plan. Just fire. "My name is Gabriel Reyes," I'm a U.S. Marine Corps veteran. I served in Vietnam with 1st Recon, 1969. A few nights ago, someone decided that a piece of my history, my brother's history, wasn't worth looking at. They called it unsightly. A violation. They said it didn't fit the aesthetic. So they towed it. They dropped it. And they destroyed it. He paused, the silence stretching long enough for the weight of his words to land. That bike wasn't just metal and gas. It was rebuilt from a rusted-out corpse of a machine that survived the war, just like I did. I rebuilt it in honor of my friend Julian Cortez, who didn't make it home. Every bolt, every scratch, every patch of leather, I put there with my own hands. And now it's shattered, lying in a gravel lot, because some HOA clown with a clipboard thought it didn't match the neighborhood. So I'm letting you know, this isn't over. Not even close. He uploaded the video to the Heritage Writers YouTube channel and walked away. By the time the sun rose, it had 24,000 views. By lunch, it was over 110,000. And by dinner, it was everywhere. The comment section exploded. HOA messed with the wrong vet. This man's a legend, justice for Scout. I watched this man build that bike. This is personal. Because Heritage Writers wasn't just a passion project, it was a movement. Gabriel had spent the last decade quietly gaining a cult following for his meticulous restorations of vintage military bikes. Indian Scouts, Harley WLAs, even rare Royal Enfields used by Allied forces. Every build had a story. Every video had heart. He didn't just restore machines, he resurrected legacies. He had nearly 300,000 subscribers, most of whom had followed the Scout project from day one. They had watched him clean rust with wire brushes, reforge a bent suspension from scrap, even hand sew the leather seat from an old Marine duffel bag. They had watched him breathe life back into that bike. Now they watched it broken, and they were furious. Motorcycle forums lit up. Veteran networks began sharing the story. One retired colonel commented, "They didn't just disrespect a man. They disrespected every soldier who ever left something behind." Within 24 hours, the video was featured on a national biker blog. Then came a TikTok recap that hit 2.4 million views. News outlets began circling, requesting interviews. Hashtags like #JusticeForScout, #HOAOverreach, and #HonorJulian trended across Twitter and Facebook. But Gabriel didn't care about going viral. He cared about accountability. He picked up the phone and called Thomas Kell, a no-nonsense trial lawyer based in Houston, known for representing veterans in federal disputes, and winning. They'd met once at a charity ride 5 years back. Gabriel remembered him as sharp, ruthless, and unshakably principled. Thomas answered on the second ring. "Reyes?" Gabriel wasted no time. "I've got a lawsuit for you." 10 minutes later, Thomas was reviewing the video. 20 minutes after that, he was assembling a team. By nightfall, Gabriel was sitting in a war room, his dining table, surrounded by files, laptop screens, and 2 paralegals combing through HOA documents line by line. The team pulled Fox Hollow's bylaws, which specifically prohibited towing from private driveways without a court order. Emails Darren Wells had sent to board members referring to the Scout as junk. Security footage from Gabriel's porch cam, showing the tow truck pulling up at 2:14 a.m., no notice, no warning. "This isn't just negligence," Thomas said, flipping through a printed HOA charter. "It's malicious intent. They knew what they were doing. And they knew who they were doing it to." Gabriel nodded once. "They thought I was just some old man with a rusty bike," he said, voice low. Thomas smirked. "Yeah, well, turns out that old man has an army behind him." Gabriel didn't smile. He was too focused for that now. Because the war they started? He was going to finish it. Comment 1 if you think Gabriel was absolutely right to fight back. By Monday morning, the cease and desist order was served. It arrived on Darren Wells' front porch in a thick, cream-colored envelope bearing the letterhead of Kell, Morrison & Tate, a law firm that didn't do petty arguments. They did damage. Real, expensive, career-ending damage. Inside was a civil complaint, already filed and stamped, Reyes vs. Fox Hollow Homeowners Association et al. Amount sought, $1 million. Charges included destruction of historic private property, trespass and unlawful seizure, violation of veteran protections under state statute, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Attached were photos of the crushed Scout, a full valuation report citing restoration and historical significance, and screenshots of emails between board members that had been leaked anonymously, emails where Darren called the bike scrap and junk some war dog welded together in a shed. Gabriel never saw Darren read it, but he imagined the look on his face. And that was enough. Darren, of course, didn't take it seriously. To him, Gabriel was just an old man clinging to rusted memories and internet sympathy. He called an emergency board meeting in the community clubhouse, walked in with sunglasses on his head and a smug half-laugh, and waved the lawsuit like it was a parking ticket. "This guy's bluffing," he said. "You think anyone's going to give him $1 million for a busted motorcycle?" One board member, a woman named Jenna who'd mostly kept quiet during the last meeting, asked cautiously, "Have you seen the video?" Darren scoffed. Yeah. His sad little sob story. "You know how many viral veterans pop up every month?" But the others weren't nodding. They were sweating. Because as Darren spoke, the HOA's email inbox was imploding. Hundreds of messages from viewers, reporters, motorcycle clubs, even lawyers from national veteran organizations. Local TV trucks were already parked outside the neighborhood entrance, hoping for a quote or confrontation. A screenshot of the complaint had made the rounds on Twitter. The headline on Reddit read, "HOA destroyed a war vet's tribute bike, now they're getting sued into oblivion." Within 48 hours it was on the front page of 2 biker magazines, shared by dozens of verified military accounts, and covered by Fox 9 Local, NBC Houston, and even The Guardian. One segment ended with, "A classic motorcycle, restored in honor of a fallen brother in arms, now shattered by a neighborhood HOA, and the nation is watching how this ends." Darren still didn't blink. But the rest of the board? They began to fold. First was Dave, the treasurer, who sent a polite resignation via email late Tuesday night citing a personal family matter. Then Karen, the secretary, who just stopped showing up altogether. By Friday, only 3 remained: Darren, his sycophantic VP, and a newer member who looked like he aged a decade in 5 days. Meanwhile, inside Gabriel's house, the legal team moved like a military unit. Thomas Kell had gone from calm counselor to attack dog, coordinating press inquiries, pressuring the HOA's insurer, and drafting witness lists. Gabriel's security footage had captured the entire 2:14 a.m. tow, no prior notice, no consent, no posted warnings. Crystal clear. Even worse for the HOA, turns out they didn't have the authority to tow from private driveways at all. Fox Hollow's bylaws had a specific clause, buried on page 72, stating that any removal of resident property must be approved via court petition and written notice. They had neither. Worse still, one of Thomas's paralegals uncovered a string of financial inconsistencies. Maintenance fees billed to the HOA with no service records. Darren's signature authorizing multiple purchases from a landscaping company, owned by his cousin. Missing funds from the HOA discretionary budget over the last 3 fiscal years. Gabriel didn't even have to swing the axe. The community picked it up for him. Angry homeowners began organizing, first online, then at real-life gatherings in backyards, garages, even coffee shops. Someone created a Facebook group, Take Back Fox Hollow, and within days over 300 residents joined. They began digging through HOA budgets, requesting financial disclosures, circulating screenshots of Darren's messages, and demanding accountability. Gabriel never told them to do it. He never asked anyone to fight for him. But when the Scout fell, it became everyone's symbol. A symbol of how far petty authority would go. Of how easy it was to bully someone, until the wrong someone fought back. 2 weeks after the complaint was filed, the case went before a district court judge. It lasted all of 40 minutes. Darren's attorney tried the usual tactics, arguing about community rules, aesthetic expectations, and unfortunate misunderstandings. But Thomas Kell came with receipts, video footage, bylaws, valuation reports, witness testimony from Gabriel's neighbors, and even a former HOA member who'd quietly quit the board after clashing with Darren over ethics. The judge didn't just rule in Gabriel's favor. He issued a formal statement condemning the HOA's actions as grossly negligent and fundamentally disrespectful to a decorated military veteran, and awarded full damages of $1 million, plus legal fees. When the verdict came down, Darren didn't speak. He just stared, pale and silent, as if the numbers on the judgment sheet were written in fire. Because now came the part he truly hadn't prepared for. Fox Hollow didn't have $1 million. The HOA's operating account had barely $48,000. Insurance refused to cover the liability due to procedural violations. They had one asset left with any real value: Darren Wells' house. Under court order, it was to be liquidated and sold at auction, to pay for what he destroyed. Was the HOA completely out of line? Comment yes or no below. The for sale sign went up on Darren Wells' lawn less than a week after the ruling. It didn't take long. The court-appointed auctioneer listed the 4-bedroom colonial-style house at a discounted price, hoping to move it quickly to satisfy the $1 million judgment. No one in Fox Hollow made an offer. No one even asked for a tour. To them, that house had become something else entirely, a symbol of arrogance, humiliation, and downfall. Gabriel Reyes bought it in cash. The listing agent didn't recognize him at first. Just another older man with steel in his voice and a purpose in his walk. But the moment Gabriel handed her the check, and she read the name, her jaw tightened slightly. "You're the one with the bike?" He nodded. "Not just the bike. The memory." He didn't move in. He didn't touch the kitchen. He didn't open a single bedroom door. Instead, he brought in a crew. Not contractors. Volunteers. Veterans. Bikers. Mechanics. Neighbors. People from across the state who had followed his story and now showed up with toolboxes, paintbrushes, and purpose. Some had served in Iraq, some in Korea, some had never served at all, but they all believed in what the house would become. Heritage Scout Hall. The living room was gutted and transformed into a museum-quality exhibition space, lit by ceiling-mounted LEDs that cast warm light across polished wood floors. The windows were replaced with anti-glare security glass. Custom-built display cases lined the walls, holding pieces of military gear from every major American conflict of the 20th century: helmets, patches, ration kits, photos donated by families of fallen soldiers. But at the center, on a raised, spotlighted platform surrounded by a low glass barrier, stood the Scout. Or what it had become. The mangled frame had been stripped, straightened, and reforged by master hands. The gas tank had been replated in brushed bronze, etched with Julian Cortez's name, service number, and the emblem of the 1st Recon Battalion. The seat had been recrafted from leather taken from an old Marine-issued duffel bag, just like before. The engine, tuned to perfection, purred like thunder held in a cage. It was no longer just a motorcycle. It was a monument. The opening day drew hundreds. Families. Journalists. Veterans in full-dress uniform. Biker clubs from across Texas rolled in on their own restored rides, engines rumbling like war drums. Gabriel stood near the entrance in his pressed denim, flanked by members of the Veterans Motorcycle Riders Association, who had come out in force to show support. A camera crew from CBS Houston set up in the corner. A columnist from the Wall Street Journal asked for an interview. Even a team from the Smithsonian's Transportation History Division made a surprise appearance to request a long-term collaboration. None of that seemed to matter to Gabriel. He stood beside the Scout, arms crossed, gaze steady, while a young boy, no older than 10, walked up to the display and whispered, "My grandpa had one of these in Vietnam." Gabriel knelt, smiled softly. "Then you tell him we kept the memory alive." Outside, a small crowd had formed on the sidewalk. Some were residents, Some were just curious. All of them stared at the name now etched in steel letters across the new iron gate. Heritage Scout Hall. Preserving honor. Defending memory. And just beneath it, a small bronze plaque that read, "In memory of Corporal Julian Cortez, and every brother lost but never forgotten. Let no man's tribute be called an eyesore again." That night, as the crowd thinned and the lights dimmed, Gabriel stepped out to the driveway, the same driveway Darren Wells once called unsightly. He stared across the cul-de-sac, where neighbors now waved instead of whispering. Where silence had once been soaked in judgment, it now carried respect. He took a deep breath and looked back at the house, the one Darren used to rule like a petty king. Now, it belonged to the truth, to history, to something bigger than control. Every morning at 7 a.m., the sound of the Scout's engine echoed down the streets of Fox Hollow. It wasn't loud in the obnoxious sense, it was measured, deliberate, like a slow heartbeat reminding the neighborhood of everything that had changed. The deep-throated rumble rolled off the asphalt and bounced off the polished garage doors of pastel-perfect homes. No one complained anymore. No letters. No fines. People stepped out with coffee mugs just to listen. Some waved. Some placed hands over their hearts. Because the man on that motorcycle wasn't just a veteran anymore. He was a symbol. 2 months after Heritage Scout Hall opened, a short video went viral on TikTok. It was only 45 seconds long. Gabriel kickstarting the Scout, riding slow down the street with the wind in his jacket, the golden tank catching morning sunlight like a medal. The caption read, "They destroyed his tribute bike. He rebuilt it. And bought the home of the man who tried to erase it. Justice has an engine." The video hit 3.1 million views in 4 days. A week later, the Washington Post ran a Sunday feature. "The ride that defeated an HOA, one veteran's road to justice." Then came CNN. Then NPR. Then podcasts, biker channels, veteran networks. Interviews poured in. Gabriel turned most of them down. He wasn't chasing fame. But the story moved on its own. What started as one man's battle against a petty HOA spiraled into something national. Veteran groups began sharing their own stories about being harassed by HOAs, fined for flying service flags, ticketed for displaying memorial plaques. Community organizers launched campaigns demanding protections for historical and military tributes on private property. Lawmakers listened. By the following legislative session, House Bill 1432, informally dubbed the Reyes Act, was introduced in Texas and passed with bipartisan support. It placed strict limits on HOA authority regarding seizure or towing of personal property from private driveways, restrictions on historically significant displays, fines against certified military tributes. 5 other states followed with similar bills. What Darren Wells had triggered in arrogance, Gabriel had turned into reform. But for Gabriel, the impact wasn't in headlines or signatures. It was in the small things. A folded letter left at the hall's gate from a Gold Star mother. "Thank you for making a place that remembers." A high school class trip that ended with students sketching the Scout. An older neighbor, once silent, who now stopped by with an old army photo of her late husband and whispered, "He rode one just like it." 1 year after the verdict, CBS aired a retrospective titled, "Revenge Ride," 1 year later. The final segment showed Gabriel standing beside the Scout, now enclosed in a temperature-controlled glass case at the center of the hall. When asked how he felt about the journey, from the towing, to the lawsuit, to the reform, he said nothing for a moment. Then he looked into the camera and said, "I didn't build that bike to show off. I built it to remember. They tried to erase it. So now, it'll never be forgotten." That night, Gabriel went for a ride. Not far, just a slow loop around Fox Hollow under the setting sun. The engine thrummed steady beneath him, the wind cool against his skin. As he passed the cul-de-sac, a few porch lights flicked on. A kid waved. A couple raised their drinks. Somewhere in the distance, a sprinkler clicked on. But all Gabriel heard was the Scout. Alive. Strong. Unforgettable. And as he turned onto Heritage Drive, he smiled, not because he'd won, but because he had built something that couldn't be taken away. If you think this story deserves to be seen by more people, hit like and share it forward. At its heart, this story wasn't just about a motorcycle. It was about memory. About the right to honor the past without being silenced by petty rules or self-important authority. Gabriel didn't fight the HOA for pride, he fought because something sacred had been trampled. And in doing so, he reminded all of us that what we build from love, history, and sacrifice deserves protection. In a world that often values uniformity over meaning, it's easy to feel bullied into silence. But as Gabriel showed us, standing your ground, even quietly, can inspire change far beyond your driveway. He didn't just win a lawsuit. He sparked reform, reminded neighbors of their shared history, and turned a symbol of control into a monument of remembrance. The lesson? Never underestimate the quiet ones. And never let anyone tell you that honoring your past makes you a problem. Because sometimes, justice doesn't knock. It rumbles in slow, steady, and unforgettable.